or Marianne, I'm sorry, your hand is raised. All right, here's how, okay, so can you hear us? Okay, here's what you need to go to the little microphone. It says you can't hear us. That's fine. I'll type it.
Just for the group's benefit, I think I just heard from Joyce Cole, who says she'll be joining us momentarily. And Stephen Casey said he'd be a few minutes late. But we should get going. All right, I'm going to start things. It's about 7:06 on Monday, February 7th, 2022. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Village of Ossining HPC, Historic Preservation Commission. I'm Adam Markovics. Could the others in attendance this evening please state their names for the record?
Dan Garpowit.
Jaime Martinez, Planning Director.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan. And we have someone having technical difficulties. There's, I think, a sixth person.
Stephen Casey.
Oh, good.
Bring him over right now.
Hi, Adam, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what was going on.
Say your name for the record.
This is Mary Kay Griner.
Good evening, Mary
Hi.
Kay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And it looks
Stephen Casey, you're over now on the attendee side, so you just need to turn on your mic or your picture or both.
Okay.
good evening, Stephen. Could you state your name for the record?
Oh, sure. Stephen Casey.
Okay, good. So let's get started. The first item on, there are no applications before us tonight. It's just discussion items. There are three of them: the HPC web page, the high school essay contest or video contest, and National Register listing. Joyce Cole, who may be joining us, had been interfacing with the planning department regarding some changes to the HPC web page to make it obvious which buildings within the village are locally landmarked and not otherwise situated in a historic and architectural design district. But Joyce isn't here right now, so we're going to have to defer that discussion either to later today or to another day altogether. With regard to the second item on the agenda, the high school essay video contest, I regret to say I have not heard back from the high school. I had forwarded before the start of this month, about a week before the start of this month, a copy of the proposal that we had put together. And Joyce Cole and I had sort of modeled the template from last year into a Black History Month specific proposal to tie in with the exhibit that Joyce has curated that's open now. It opened yesterday at Bethany Art Center on local Black history. And so the essay prompt or video prompt is essentially, write about or make a video about site structure or building in the village that has some significance to local Black history and talk about why this particular site's of interest to you and what you learned in writing about it or making a video about it. That was the prompt. As I said, I forwarded this proposal to the high school, our contact at the high school about a week before the start of this month. I followed up about a week after that, and we're still waiting to hear from whomever is reviewing this at higher levels about when it can launch. So I will keep the group posted as to whether I hear anything more from the high school. I think it's probably worth my following up again tomorrow, given that another week has passed without an answer. So that's the update there. And the final item on the agenda is National Register listing. And I should remind the group that we did a webinar back in the fall of last year on rehabilitation tax credits available to homeowners and business owners who rehabilitate their properties in accordance with Secretary of the Interior guidelines. In other words, are rehabilitations that are historically appropriate. And to take advantage of these tax credits, a property has to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And in response to that webinar, several property owners reached out to either trustees or one or two to me personally to get some more information about how to get the process started. How do I get my house, for example, listed on the National Register of Historic Places so that I can take advantage of these tax credits? I've never personally gotten a property listed on the National Register, and was eager to learn more about the process. And Stephen Casey volunteered a few meetings ago to look further into the process himself. And Stephen, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think you gave me the green light in some emails earlier today to ask you to present to the group today on what you've learned about the process for listing a property on the National Register.
Sure, no, not a problem, and happy to do so. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. There's a sort of a dual process. In order to get listed on the National Register, you first have to be listed on the New York State Historic Register. And to do that, you go through a rep, and I'll get into details. I'll go through the basic steps and then get into some more details. I'll also share my screen with some information that I've gathered. There's actually a wealth of information on websites, both NewYorkState.gov, and there's a not-for-profit organization called the Preservation League of New York State. So number one, you have to be determined in a general way as to whether or not you are eligible, and the Historic Preservation Liaison does that. You go through some basic steps, submit information about the property, and this can be done for one's individual house or even a district. So some basic information has to be submitted, including photographs, and there's a generalized determination as to whether or not this property, a certain property, would be eligible. And I just to back up something, or just to elaborate a little further, nothing great or historic needs to necessarily have happened in the property. The property itself, though, should be deemed worthy of preservation because of the preservation of a certain architectural style, historical genre, something like that. But George Washington need not have slept in the house. And conversely, if George Washington did sleep in the house, but it's been so altered and so changed, it may not qualify. So that's the sort of broad categories that the rep had told me as an example. Then there has to be some further research, and this is done by the individual wishing to list the property, or let's say we as a group or a group within the village wanted to have a district preserved. There's a further process done regarding a lot of research, town map, discussion of why this property is historic. And for that step, people usually get preservation specialists. I'll get into that further. There are people who charge money for that, but it seems like the Preservation League of New York also provides assistance for that. Then once that is done, that whole package is presented to this rep, and then that is presented to a state commission that makes a final determination. Once it's accepted on the New York State listing, it is New York State then that passes it on to the National Registry with a recommendation that it be listed. In almost all cases, if that commission decides that it's worthy, the National Registry will accept the property. For the tax credit side, also, if you're doing work on a property or a village, let's say it's maintaining an historic site within a village, town, city, it needs to get prior approval from the New York State Historical Preservation Committee as to what is being done. And once that approval is given, then tax credits, I believe up to 20%, there are ceilings on what can be done. And there's details on the site in terms of maximum credit value available, but generally up to 20% of the value of the work, with a lot of different loopholes there. So what I'd like to do is maybe just present my screen and go into some of the sites that the committee members can start checking and that we can refer people to, as well as some of the information that I got. Now, I think Jamie sent the package I got from Chelsea Towers, the rep, to everyone. Hopefully that was done. If not, I'll follow
I
up.
don't recall, if you did, just for whatever it's worth, I don't recall getting something, but.
Okay. It should have gone to the village emails, and I can follow up.
Oh, all right.
It out.
And find out.
You can share.
Okay.
I've set it so that you can share your screen if you'd like.
Okay. So share.
By the way, is that where the Zoom invite went for today, to the village email? Because I thought I got it through my personal Gmail last time. It's just a matter of procedure.
Zoom invites go to your village email.
Oh, the village email. Okay, so that's what I didn't look at. Thank you.
I don't know. Can people see my screen now?
Nope.
No, I can't.
All right, I have to do something with security and privacy here. I don't quite know how to do this on Zoom.
Stephen, you see the green arrow in the middle of the Zoom screen at the bottom? There's a toolbar.
Right.
The share screen. Press the share screen button.
Allow Zoom to share your screen, open systems preferences, security and privacy to grant access. Let me see. How do I grant access? Oh, sorry. And is my screen viewable now? No, probably not. Okay, I don't know how to do this on Zoom. I have to do something.
Okay, so at the bottom of your screen,
Yeah.
Stephen, there
Yeah.
should be, I don't know what it looks like for y'all, but there should be a list of like mute, stop video, participants, Q&A. So do
Yeah.
you see that? At the bottom,
Yes, I do.
there should be a button that says share screen. It's a green button.
Yes, yeah, I got that. The problem is I'm being thrown into my
Okay, so
security.
yeah,
Okay,
your security thing. Okay.
yeah.
Are you using like a work email or something? A work
I'm
computer?
on home email on Zoom.
Home computer, I mean? Okay, so what happens when you hit the share screen is it gives you an option of like multiple things that you can share, usually.
Ah.
And maybe coming up as a pop-up or something. So when you hit the share, do you get a list of options of things you could be sharing?
Now I do. Okay. Got it.
Now select it and then there you go. Perfect.
Great, thank you. Okay. It's crazy, I'm using multiple apps at work and it's mastering all of this. That's a pain in the neck here. Okay, let me move this down. Okay. So this is the State Historic Preservation Office site. And if you can see the address up here, parks.newyork.gov/shpo/, and there is a ton of information in here on the process. The National Register process, preservation assistance, online tools for applying, technical assistance, things like that. So that is definitely worth going to, and there's a ton of information in here. So, it's too much to even describe. So that's number one. Number two, let me see if I can bring up what. Can you see this now? New York State and National Register of Historic Places? No, okay, I think I have got to go back into that Zoom window. What did you tell me to go into a moment ago?
We're able to see everything that you're showing us right now. So just, you can make any changes you want to your screen and we can see.
Oh, what are you seeing now? Are you seeing something?
I think we're seeing your desktop. It's parks.ny.gov SHPO.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to display something else.
Okay, so minimize that.
Okay,
See what happens, because it's possible that you decided to share your web page, like you shared, essentially Chrome or whatever, instead of sharing your screen. So can you minimize your Chrome or whatever you're using?
okay.
Okay. All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go stop share. Okay, I'm gonna stop your share for you.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, do I click a button that says new share? No.
No. I'm gonna stop your share for you real quick. Okay. All right, now I want you to go hit share again, but
Okay.
this time, what I want you to do is instead of sharing the one that looks like Chrome or whatever, I want you to share your screen. That way we can see your screen. Do you have one screen or two screens?
One screen.
Okay, so then share your screen this time. It can be a little confusing. The Chrome one will have like the Chrome signal, and then if you have another app open, it'll have that little app signal.
One will say simply desktop. Is that what I want to share?
That's what you want to share, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Perfect, now we can see everything.
Great. Okay. Now I got it. So if you see this, this is one of the PDFs that I got from Chelsea Towers at the office. And it gives some pretty, and again, this was shared with everybody in the email. And it gives a pretty good outline of the process. And here in particular is the process for state and national register listing. So you go to the National Register rep, which is Chelsea Towers, should be on the email that was forwarded to you. You submit an application for the listing. The rep will evaluate the eligibility, first of all, just have a simple sort of kick the tires and check out what's happening. Then you develop a draft nomination with a whole checklist of items. It is then reviewed by the New York State Board for Historic Preservation. And if the board believes the property is eligible, it will notify the owners of the property and then recommend that it be nominated to the National Register. The final documents are then presented to the State Historic Preservation Office. And if everyone concurs, it gets listed on the state register and then is nominated to the National Register. And then that nomination is sent to the National Park Service. And if that's approved, then it gets and then a final notification is sent out. So that's, maybe, let me just pause there, but that's what I was able to find. And this is a pretty good example of what I was talking about. This is a Greek revival style here on the left, well preserved. This apparently was Greek revival, and as you can see, not well preserved. Which one do you think will get registered? So an example of, two extremes here. Maybe I'll just stop for a minute and then go into something else.
Stephen, this is just terrific. So thank you so much for presenting just this much. It's a real help. And for those who may not have been able to attend tonight's meeting, this is going to be recorded and made available to others who may be interested in this. So this has, I think, been very, very helpful. I do have a question about the real early steps. So I'm looking at number 3 on this checklist, or this summary of the steps. What is number 2?
So again, you have a generalized discussion with the rep and then submit an application. The application is available on the site that I've highlighted to the National Register rep. And then that rep will evaluate the eligibility of the property. And that can be an iterative process, so you don't necessarily get thrown out of the box. This rep will look at what you've sent in. If there needs to be more information or clarity, that rep will look at it again and ask for more information. I think this is pretty much like a kick the tires kind of thing to see, is this even, remotely eligible for listing before a lot of time would be spent on the process. And then if
sorry.
that hurdle is cleared, then you would go to the step 4 there.
It looks like there's a preference that this initial application for listing be submitted through CRIS, which is the Cultural Resource Information System. I believe that's what the acronym stands for. And I suppose you'd have to create an account for yourself on CRIS in order to submit. No, or you're not sure about that part of the process?
I'm not sure. I did some poking there, and I think you got it right. You create your own account, and then that is how documents are submitted and information is shared.
And Stephen, do you think you could share with us that that initial application referred to in number 2 on this list, the preliminary information form and statement of owner support?
It looks like this resource information system provides a lot of detailed information. You've got a statewide map of historic properties, 1.5 million pages of scanned paper records, photographs, etc., information on state and federal tax credits. Let me see if there's a way to get into this thing here. Ah, yes, I think one has to start an account here.
Okay.
Yeah, before we get into looking at a checklist. Yeah. So I won't start that here.
That initial application, is it available anywhere online other than on or through CRIS?
I can reach out to Chelsea to find out. And I'll do that and then send it around. Yeah, I don't see a listing of the forms. I'm sure it's available though. It's got to be.
So I'm thinking of the owners of a particular property in the village of Austining that reached out to me, a Victorian house on Hamilton Avenue, and they wanted to start this process. So I think that the first thing for them to do, you've already connected with the field rep for our area from the State Historic Preservation Office. Again, her name is Chelsea Towers.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I think the next thing, oh, there it is.
Preliminary information form. This is probably it. So owner information, type of property, location, description, architectural style, foundation walls, additions, alterations, additional buildings, landscape features. And then information, yes, information here on the history of the property, photos, things like that. They do require a map of where the property is located.
Mm-hmm. The form itself doesn't seem all that demanding, but they are requesting, even at this preliminary stage, a fairly significant amount of supporting material. Now, I just saw something that said a minimum of 20 photographs is generally appropriate.
May I ask, what's the minimum age for the property? Is there a blanket minimum age?
It's generally 50 years, over 50 years. Exceptions are made if something exceptional happened there within the last 50 years. It's generally 50 years. In general, religious property is excluded unless, exceptions are made. There's apparently this list of exclusions and then a whole list of exceptions to those exclusions. So, if the religious property can be shown to be of significant historic significance, that can be, that's generally waived. The only thing is that there is no funding, no state funding or tax credits given for religious property. So any funding or grants that might be available would not be given for religious property.
And that's true at the federal level too, I guess?
I believe so from the reading I was able to do, yeah.
Is there a fee to apply?
I don't know. She didn't mention that.
And do they do some on-site evaluation of the property or just the pictures?
At this stage, it would be the pictures. So yeah, they are, 20 photographs. And again, this is something that I think Chelsea Towers would be able to walk the owner or the sponsor of this through and say, do I really need 20? I'm thinking of my house. What would I take 20 photos of? But maybe, they would want, just the roof line or details of the porch or, things like that. But I think you would certainly get guidance from her. In fact, she said, I would certainly give guidance on what I would need. But you do need a sketch of the building or floor plan.
Do we need all this to make it a landmark for Ossining? I've forgotten what our process is. Can we landmark a property without it being on the National Register or the state?
Yes, we can landmark a property even if it's not on the state or national registers.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, the Village Board of Trustees does that. It would be a recommendation from this commission. This commission cannot do that.
That's very good to remember. And do we require this kind of information, or is any of this duplicated between what we require in the state or the federal government?
There's some overlap. I don't think for village landmarking purposes, we need quite as extensive supplementary materials as what's being asked for here.
So it's, just to give the quick rundown. There's an important distinction between the federal, state, and the local programs. And I think that, primarily that's in the application of what it renders. And so if you get a federal, National Historic Registry, then you get access to some of the grants like Stephen's been talking about. If you get the state registry, then you have access to some of those types of programs and grants. And if you have local registry, then you're generally speaking subject to special rules. Local registries usually do not provide special rules for, state and national landmarks, but only to local landmarks. And criteria for those generally are going to be, dependent on whatever the local criteria is decided is important because of those distinctions. Again, local registry usually doesn't give you access to local funds, although the state registry, the state grant programs sometimes do recognize local historic designations when determining whether they're going to be eligible for those state grants. And the national registry opens you up to, I think, tax credits and different programs. So they're all a little bit different. They all, they're all based off of, similar types of policies. But
oh, sorry, Jaime.
Well, no, I mean, it's just, think about it like this: local landmarking usually comes with obligations that you need to meet. National and state level comes with money afforded to you, grants that are available to you to help maintain your property.
And do we have a 50-year minimum age too, or is that very different? Do we have?
I don't know. I don't know that you do. So again, making sort of a broad distinction between local and national. In Yonkers, for instance, they put up a painting on a wall. Somebody did a mural, and people liked that mural. And then a new building, they decided when they were putting up this mural that they were going to paint it on the side of a dilapidated building that was, for all other purposes, abandoned. And so at a certain point, the building department said this building's, poor condition, needs to come down. The Historic Preservation Board decided to landmark it. And because this 10-year-old mural was historically important to them. And then the building department the next day condemned the building, and it was torn down within 3 days. So no, it doesn't need to be old to be historic to a local landmarking body unless the rules say that it has to. I'm not sure that our rules require that it be old to be considered historically relevant. And I'm not sure about the state or the federal lists either, but certainly that helps.
So if you own an old property and you're considering landmarking it or asking for designation, it's very much in your interest financially to get a state and then get the federal designation, because you get credits. I don't know if they're retroactively paid to you after you do the work, or it's for work that you do in the future.
No, it's you have to have the work reviewed and approved prior to it even being done in order to get the credit.
Yeah, you did mention, I'm sorry, I'd forgotten that, Stephen. Thank you. So is there an instance where somebody would want possibly our help to get a state and then national registration? You have to go to the state, as you said, then national, but wouldn't necessarily want us to designate it locally, because then they have, like you said, some obligations for, review of what work you might do in the future, for example, in perpetuity. Is there any reason why somebody wouldn't also want the village designation, or does it trigger? Is that some way to trigger the village to look at the property again?
Well, from what I understand, you have much more, both a village and an individual has much more protection from, let's say, somebody coming in, a developer buying something and just smashing it down if it's done at the local level.
Right.
Apparently, somebody could come in tomorrow, buy the First Baptist Church, which I believe is on the National Register, buy that property and just knock it all down and put up a glass box. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop it.
Right.
So, but if the village of Ossining had that designated as an historic site, then a developer could not walk in and do that unless the appropriate parties in the village.
So there's a ton of caveats to everything that you just said. Generally, that's accurate, but there are a whole lot of caveats, because there are ways that a historic building can be torn down, and there are there are a lot of reasons why people want to have historic national recognition because of the money it affords them, but they don't want the local obligations, and so they'll go for one over the other. And there are a lot of reasons, conversely, that people will support local registration, even though it means, more difficult, but they don't go through the time and effort to get on the national state historic list. So
Yeah, this is just generalized information. It's
it is,
not.
no, it's very good general information, but I want to make it clear that
Oh, great.
there
Yeah,
have been instances, even in Ossining, that buildings that were part of the Main Street Historic District were torn down.
Yeah.
So,
But I guess, may I just ask one other question about that? Because it's really fascinating to hear all this, Stephen and Adam. Is it possible when someone applies for the state, if they never contact the village, would the state ever tell us that there's a property in our district that is being considered to be landmarked? Or do they leave us out of the loop?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, okay. I don't know if it could be important or not. I don't know if it would, is it advantage for us to be in the loop and therefore be able to opine on a property for local designation that is maybe in all likelihood going to be designated at the state level and the national, or we're just, relying on people to, engage us, or for other community members to decide somebody else's property should be historic. I don't know, that's the only reason I'm asking, because if the state lets us in on it, and it gives us an extra opportunity to, I guess, consider it at the local level. If they never let us in on it, we could have property right now that might be state or nationally designated that we may not know about. Or is that not true? If something becomes nationally designated, would it automatically show up on a property deed for us?
I believe there is a list of the properties that have been so registered. So that is accessible on some site, which I haven't explored.
Well, so there's some impacts for seeker, State Environmental Quality Review Act. So if somebody wanted to come in, and if they got listed on the state registry, what would happen is that when somebody wanted to come and develop next to it or around it or on that site, when you were doing the environmental impact review, that would come up, right? So at that point, because it's now registered with the state, it would come up, the public would know about it at that time. So there is some local impacts to future development once it becomes registered with the state. And Stuart, correct me if I'm wrong, is it just the state list that shows up on seeker, or is it the federal list as well?
I believe it's state only, Jaime.
Yeah. And so that, getting listed on the state list will have an impact on seeker. It doesn't necessarily mean that it prevents a project from moving forward, but it will, there is some risk that comes with getting something listed on the state. But there is, there's nothing to prevent somebody who gets a property that's listed on the state from sort of allowing it to fall into disrepair, and ultimately, upon falling into disrepair, getting torn down. So,
is it possible then that we have some nationally designated properties we're not aware of? That's, I guess, the other thing I'm asking, despite our best efforts to maintain a database.
No. There's a register that's searchable online.
Right. And do we just
you can
download it, or
plug in the word Ossining and find everything on the National Register in the Village of Ossining. With that, let's derailed a bit. Stephen, did you have more to add?
I did. I have a few more points here, and something that may be interesting in terms of, our ongoing discussions about First Baptist. So this here is the criteria, number one. Let me start here to get for evaluation. So criteria A, associated with events that have made a significant historical contribution. Or B, associated with the lives of significant persons, or C, embody a distinctive characteristic of a type, period, or method of construction, the work of a master artistic values, etc., or have yielded or may yield important information in prehistory or history. Now it goes on to say that ordinarily cemeteries, birthplaces, graves of historical figures, properties owned by religious institutions or used for religious purposes or have been moved from their original location, and properties that have achieved significance within the last 50 years shall not be considered as eligible. However, they can qualify if they are integral parts of districts that do meet the criteria or if they fall into these categories. So we go on and you can see that there will be a lot of exceptions to what they just said. Going to number A, though, a religious property deriving primary significance from architectural or artistic distinction or historical importance. So what maybe I'd like to flip to. So there's a wealth of information on here and numerous links. And while you were talking before, there is a list of all the forms that need to get filled out in PDF form here as well. To Adam answer your earlier question, Adam, but remember I said step 2 is in the process of further evaluation, and that seems to be even a bit more onerous. Let me see if I can get back there. Oh no, I know what I'll do. See if I can find it. Bear with me 1 second. Yes. You can still see my screen, I hope. Item number 4 here, develop a draft nomination. Under the guidance of the National Registered Rep, this is the process in particular where they recommend that people get consultants to help. And there are consultants and experienced people who have done this. But what I found out is that in addition to paying for this, the Preservation League of New York State, and it's just preservednys.org, has a division, and you can go in and click it to see what they can provide programs. Let me see. So they have technical services. So if you click this on, you'll see that they can provide links to and may be able to provide support for that second part of the process. So that may be a way to get help, because this is a not-for-profit that is interested in preserving historical sites in the state of New York. So that's their mission. So that would be a resource to direct people to, or to go to yourselves if you're interested. One thing, though, I was thinking about the First Baptist is they are accepting nominations for something called 7 to Save. It would be every year people nominate properties that they think are worthy of preservation in New York State, and 7 properties are chosen every year by a committee, and then those properties are given publicity. So this might be something that could be explored. Again, funding is not allowed, and they've said it on this site as well. The Preservation League also gives out grants for significant properties, but both to individuals and to villages like ours, or groups perhaps like ours, or committees in villages and towns. But religious sites are not generally not eligible. But there is a one benefit here could possibly be promotion about what what the issue is and why this site would be worthy of preserving. But one of the things here, it said there must be a strong local group with an identified leader, contact person advocating for the protection of the site with the capacity to effectively partner with the Preservation League. So I don't know if that would, if we've got someone like that who at that church or someone who would act in that capacity. I think it's certainly architecturally significant. It's located in New York State. And another criteria, the continued existence and integrity of the site must be seriously threatened. I think we agree that it probably is in terms of at least preserving its current integrity. That's an idea. I don't know if there's any thoughts on that.
Thank you, Stephen. Did you have anything further to add, putting aside the 7 to save for a minute, anything further to add about the National Register listing process?
No, I don't. No.
Okay. All right. So a question, Stephen, is with regard to that initial application that needs to be submitted to SHPO, do we at the HPC have the capacity to assist homeowners with that part of the process? The latter part of the process where historic preservation consultants are retained, I think that's beyond our capacity. I mean, I think we could probably help homeowners navigate that part of the process somewhat, but I don't think we can. I don't think we have the capacity to get that deeply involved. In part because, again, it requires the retaining, I think, of a historic preservation specialist. But what do you think about HPC's capacity to assist with this first part, this initial part of the application, assisting a homeowner in getting that piece up and running and submitted to the state, either by Chris or by paper?
Well, two things come to mind. Perhaps somebody can jump in here. One of the things that was asked for was a site map and a location of the property within the village. So I don't know if there are village maps. I imagine there must be. And perhaps there's a way we can direct people to the appropriate department.
Site maps are something that are like, that's the easiest thing off the list. So you can always send them to the planning department. We can make a site map, no problem.
Okay, so maybe we could put together a list of things like that. The other thing I'm thinking of is the Historical Society. I know that there is information sitting in there about my property that we accessed and photocopied. I'm also thinking that Dana, who used to be on this committee and is now a trustee, might have a wealth of ideas on how to direct people or where to send people for information that they might need. So that's a kind of ideas that just jump to my mind.
Okay. I mean, I can share with the group now. At this point in time in my professional life, my own capacity to assist a homeowner with even this initial part of the process is pretty limited at this point in time. And I don't mean to put anyone on the spot right now, but you should, as a group, give some thought to whether you have the interest and time to perhaps assist a homeowner in submitting this initial application to the State Historic Preservation Office. And maybe I can leave it there for now and just ask the group to think about it, and maybe to put it in a more pointed way. If after this meeting, you think you have the capacity and the interest to help a homeowner here in the village submit an application, that 4-page application that Stephen just showed us, and assist with the supporting materials outlined, including photographs, the maps, maybe some other materials that I'm now forgetting, let me know.
See, Adam, remember it was a couple of meetings ago, there was an architect you mentioned who wanted help, and I said, you know, if he wants to reach out to me, he could. I never heard from him. Do you know if he's still someone who wants to do that?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess, has he been in touch with you? I mean, I don't know if you know of anybody else who's in that position, but you seem to recognize one person who wanted some help, and I don't know if he's, you know, had made any progress on his own or not. Do you know?
He's asked me. This is the owner of Victorian House on Hamilton Avenue, to see what kind of headway we can make. Stephen's done terrific work in sort of setting the, you know, giving us a sense of the parameters and the basics of what's involved in the process, and I'm very appreciative for that. But you know, now I need to come back to that homeowner and let him know what more, if anything, HPC can do. So Dan, if you're suggesting that you may have an interest and capacity to assist in getting this initial application off the ground, then maybe you and I can speak offline about that some more.
Yeah, if you'd like. I mean, it's very good that Steve, you know, found this stuff on the web. And as I said last time, I don't know what I could do for this guy. He probably can't do for himself, but it would be certainly a learning process for me.
Okay. All right. You and I will connect offline.
All right, I'll wait to hear from you. That's fine. That's good.
All right. Joyce Cole, are you out there?
Here.
Oh,
Okay.
hi.
Why don't we shift gears for a moment? Stephen, thank you very much. Really great work. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's well done.
Switching now to Joyce, and sorry, Joyce, to put you on the spot. I think you missed my pitch for your exhibit, which I made at the Bethany Arts Center, or I've already botched the name. It's Bethany Community Arts. Is that it?
Bethany Arts Community.
Bethany Arts Community. It's launched yesterday, and it's on through when?
March 12th.
Okay. So please, everyone on this call, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I was there yesterday and it's great.
Thank you very much.
I skipped over the first item in the agenda. Joyce, I know you've been so busy getting this exhibit off the ground, but do you have any updates about the HPC web page?
Yes, I can. I'm going to talk to Jamie to just, we're going to mimic, we thought it'd be a good idea to mimic how the listing for the Ossining Village street names is. It's like, you can link off of that to like a PDF. So you'd have the street name or the site name, and then if there's an associated PDF, it'll be almost like in a table. So it makes it very clean. You don't have to search around a lot. It will be like on the left navigation, so it's easy to find. You don't have to click around a lot of places once you hit HPC. And it's very clean.
Okay. We will stay tuned. I know you're super busy between now and the next HPC meeting, but let us know if there's any, at the next meeting, if there's any progress on the webpage front.
Okay.
One last thing I'd like to float, and I think has Catherine Wilson joined us? I see her name.
Yes, I am here. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
Catherine. No
That was
problem.
very tardy.
No problem. One last thing I'd like to float. There's been a lot of discussion today about local landmarking, National Register listing. This is for the group's consideration. So the last time HPC initiated a potential landmarking was with the Sing Sing Warden's residence, what we call the Sing Sing Warden's residence, and this was before the pandemic. And ultimately, there was quite a bit of resistance to the idea of locally landmarking that property by the condominium members. And so we shelved that potential landmarking maybe for another day. I'm not going to revisit that. But I did want to revisit local landmarking briefly before we go. In past meetings, we talked about some renovation work that had been done to the Washington School, which is the home of a church now, I believe. And it was a relatively minor alteration. It looks as if a window in the front facade was removed, and in its place was put a commercial door that, I don't know, you might find on a CVS or something. And there it is on the front of the Washington School. You can see for yourself next time you drive by or walk by. The property is on the National Register of Historic Places. So Dan was asking about, how do you know what in the village is on that register? Well, there's a website, and you can see all the properties in the village of Ossining that are on the National Register. That's one of them. There aren't that many, but that's one of them. It is not locally landmarked. It is not one of these properties that sits outside of a historic district and has that local landmark designation attached. And as a result, the owner is free to make alterations without without needing to come before the HPC with an application for a certificate of appropriateness. So a question I have for the group is, here we have a National Register listed property. Some changes have been made recently that if there had been a local landmarking in place and they had applied for a certificate of appropriateness, I doubt it would have come out the same way. And I wonder, does it make sense to consider going down the road of contacting this property owner and seeing if there's interest, and even if there's not, proposing that this property, which is on the National Register, which is included in the Significant Sites and Structures Guide that the village published 10 years ago, does it make sense to pursue this as a local landmarking project? I think Stuart mentioned that we can't landmark anything. It's the Village Board of Trustees that does that. Might this be a worthwhile project to see whether the village board, regardless of an owner's interest in locally landmarking a property, is willing and able to act on a recommendation from the HPC. That, in my view, is a slam dunk. I mean, there's no question that the property is historically significant and worthy of preservation. So does this make sense? This would be a time-consuming process, but we've been through it a few times now in recent memory, and I think we know how to do it. Is it worth doing for this property? in part as a way to get another building landmarked, which hasn't happened in years. And to see whether the Village Board of Trustees has an appetite to do it. That's my question for the group.
Adam, I have a question. The property, if it's locally landmarked, I missed it before. Are they entitled to any grant monies if that happens? In terms of, okay.
Not by virtue of the local landmarking, but by virtue of their being on the National Register, they potentially can qualify for tax credits if they undertake, renovations of any kind that are appropriate, historically appropriate. But they have nothing financially to gain from being locally landmarked.
Okay, I will say from speaking with the property owner last time, she's a preservationist herself. But she was looking for grant money, and that would have been a nice selling point if we were worried about the property owner having buy-in. But I think also that the property owner wants the ability to do whatever they want to do to the property, then that's where you would get the pushback in terms of the property owner pushing back, because this late in the game trying to landmark their property would stop them from doing things as they see fit.
Noted. I mean, I hear you. This is the dilemma of historic preservation laws. The whole idea really is that you want a community to be able to preserve buildings, and it's very rare that owners of buildings are going to say, oh yeah, no, sign me up. I want to go before a board every time I want to make changes to my building. Sounds wonderful. So, I think it's going to be like, if we're looking for a property owner who wants to be locally landmarked, I think that's going to be very hard to come by. What can I say? My thinking here is that what would the Village Board of Trustees do with a property that's unquestionably worthy of local landmark designation, with an owner who probably doesn't want to, doesn't approve of it, but the law doesn't require owner buy-in. I mean, none of these local preservation laws do, or else there probably wouldn't be historic preservation. There are criteria. Is it historically and architecturally significant, or does it represent, does it represent an important style from the past, associated with important events? There are a few criteria laid out in the law, but one criteria that doesn't exist in the law is the owner really wants it to be landmarked. That's just not in the law. So this is just a thought of mine. I was curious to hear the group's feedback on this. I don't know whether this is obviously not a building that's in imminent danger of being torn down or drastically altered, but personally, as there have not been any individually landmarked buildings in the village for a decade or more, I'm sort of wanting to test out the law and the village trustees, board of trustees' willingness to act on it where there's an appropriate application for local landmarking.
My gut feeling, reaction would be to agree with you. I think that would be nice to try it. I guess though we're back with sort of the same conundrum with, who here has the bandwidth to run with that process? We would need to figure that out. As you said, that Joyce mentioned that the property owner is a preservationist. So maybe appealing on that side could help. Whenever anybody wants to do anything with property, you have to go through some building commission here anyway. So there is a process. It's not just I'll do whatever I want with my property whenever I want anyway. And I can attest it's not that onerous to do things. I guess if you get it historically listed, though, what you need to do then has to be deemed historically appropriate or within a certain frame, which might restrict what people want to do. But maybe it's worth testing the waters, but we would need to have somebody, and I personally don't have the bandwidth with my work load right now either to really run with that. But I would be in favor of pursuing that. Oh, and by the way, before we break, I have just one more thing to add to what I said earlier. Let's finish this conversation first, though. But before we break, I just 1 minute of something to add.
Anyone have any further thoughts to add? This is just an idea. We're at the beginning of 2022, and I'm thinking about what the HPC can or cannot do going forward, and was thinking about local landmarking. So if anyone has anything to add, speak now, or we can revisit this at a later meeting. This is really just in the nature of brainstorming at this point.
Adam, I'll add just, if there's another building that we could go for where we're not gonna, I know you said it's hard to find a building where there's no resistance, but because we got so much resistance from the warden's house, I feel like this school building, I don't know, it feels like it might be another, and then that would further, I'd hate to like further the reputation that HPC is trying to like, work against the community, which isn't the case, of course, but like, people talk, but I don't know if there's another building that would maybe just be a little more fluid, just to get the ball rolling, even if it's not as magnificent or something, just to get the momentum going a little more easily, smoothly.
May I ask, so the last time 10 years ago, if anybody knows what building was it and what were the circumstances as a precedent? I mean, did the people who owned the property embrace having local designation, or was it like, you better do this or we're going to do it anyway?
It's a great question, Dan, and I wish I could answer it. I wasn't here. I wasn't on the HPC then.
Yeah.
And it's something I personally am curious about. I don't know the answer.
Would you know which building it was? I guess we could look it up. I mean, you're saying it was around 10 years ago?
Yeah,
I
think it was in 2013 that buildings like right down the hill from me, the Virium condominiums, building by the train station, that was landmarked, I think, in around 2013. Yeah.
I wonder if Deborah, who was on the commission, I think she probably was on the commission around that time. I mean, I could call her, or one of us I'd be happy to call her, or see if it, something to try to tap into memory of an old member, of a prior member.
That would be great. And if you could do that, that'd be great. How did those landmark properties get landmarked?
Yeah, because I have a feeling she was serving around that time.
Mm-hmm.
She served for a while, so I'll ask her.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything
else on this? Was that Mary Kay?
Yeah, I had a question. Is there a difference between landmarking a property as opposed to a building? Because you said that the Washington property was on the National Historic, is that what you said? But the building was not?
If I've used property and building interchangeably, that was intentional, I guess.
Okay.
I mean them interchangeably.
Okay.
Anything else on this? Stephen, you had to add one other thing from earlier?
Yeah, 2 points. One thing I read on the New York Historic Preservation League, the not-for-profit group, they will, because you had asked earlier, Adam, about somebody sort of holding a property owner's hand and helping them through the process. They might be a good resource to do just that. And one thing I read, they will in fact have somebody at least show up, take a look at your property, and can, point out various details that, might or might not put a property within the ballpark. So even at the early stage, you can get that kind of assistance. Number two, if you go on to the New York State website of historical preservation, there are various courses you can take. So if you're looking for CPEs, they're quite good and they're interesting. So not just, courses to take because you have to take them, but educational as well. And the Preservation League is running a webinar on Wednesday, I believe it was in the email from Chelsea, from 5 to 6 on the process also. And I think there's CPEs available for that as well, but both, informative plus perhaps CPEs that you might get. So that's what I wanted to share.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stephen. And I'm sorry, I don't want to prolong the meeting any further, but I did want to circle back briefly to the 7 to save. My feeling about that, Stephen, is that given the HPC's limited resources, I think, what we need to find for that First Baptist Church is some money. We've tried looking for money as a group collectively in the past and kind of come up empty-handed. What I suggest to the group, and I'll put the First Baptist Church on the agenda for March, is if you have an opportunity before the next meeting, see where things stand now. In fact, in sort of reworking the high school essay video contest proposal, I saw something about funding available through the National Trust for Historic Preservation that may have been specifically for historically Black churches. And that may be a new funding source. So First Baptist Church will be on the agenda next time. We'll revisit it. It's certainly, very, very important and worth revisiting.
I know we've all got to jump to other things in a second, but is there a point person, Adam, at the church who, if this is perhaps something that I could send that person, direct that person to? I think what it would do, maybe not funding, but might provide notoriety if it is on a state site, and you might find somebody with deep pockets who would say, yeah, I'm willing to restore this historic church. Who knows, So is there a point person for this that you could?
Stephen, that's fair enough. Yes, there was someone who I was in contact with. It goes back some time, but I think it's worth my searching my emails, assuming that the emails weren't obliterated due to that issue some time ago, and see if I can forward the link to her. I will do that.
Okay.
All right. With that said, and thank you, Stephen. That was a great overview of the National Register, State Register listing process. Very helpful, and it's now recorded and potentially viewable by others with an interest who are not able to be here tonight. With that, I would like to make a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting. Would anyone care to second that motion?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With that, I think we can conclude this evening's meeting. I will see you all in March. Please continue to stay safe and do check out Joyce Cole's phenomenal exhibit at Bethany, well, you know, the Bethany place.
Bethany Arts Community.
Yeah, that's the one. It's great. It's great.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Like,
Good night.